Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast at the Powerhouse in Communications, Genesis Communications Network. Thank you, Jason. I'm Vincent Finelli. Hour number 1, Cathy will be with us. And we're going to teach you how to save some money. And Depression style. For the second Great Depression we're in. And hour number 2, we're going to teach you about what is happening in the stock market with the manipulations, with the game shares. So that'll be Bert. And Gwyneth, I got an email from Gwyneth, and she will be back, she says, in about 2 weeks. So I'm thinking 2 or 3 weeks. Now, there's no rush. Her seat is still warm. It's not going anywhere. It's for her. And so I think Gwyneth will be back in 2 or 3 weeks. That'll be on Wednesdays. As you know, she fell off her horse. And she broke some ribs and collarbone. And, I mean, she really got banged up, punctured a lung. And she was having a tough go of it. And while she was on pain meds, I think she thought she was doing better than she actually was. And that's what happens with pain meds. So I think as they're being weaned off, she's healing faster now. That's my guess. And I'm looking forward to having Gwyneth come back. Gwyneth, we miss you, and we're in your corner. And I'm your biggest fan. If you like the kind of broadcast we've been doing lately, teaching, not specifically just automotive, but sharing these thoughts about things that we have observed here at the farm, better ways of doing things, ways of looking at things differently, not necessarily following all the typical methodology of doing things. Let me know, please. Just send me an email, instructor@usaprepares.com. Instructor, INSTRUCTOR, @usaprepares.com. Now, if you don't like what I'm doing, you can send me an email about that too. I'd love to read that. I just want to let you know, Rich wanted to do a broadcast and teach about, how we could help people get an acre or two and build a village and all that. Well, the response has been underwhelming. One person sent me an email, said, I'd like to hear more about it. And another person called me and said he wanted to meet me and talk about it. He happened to be in a nearby village. He was from out of state. And he's been calling in over the years, and he thought he should show up at the farm and meet me. I explained to him that we don't do that. That's over. I don't entertain people who I don't know anymore. That's over. There's no more expos, no more coming to the farm, show and tell. That is over. We're not doing that anymore. So I'm sorry to say that, but that's the way it is. That's the way it's the new paradigm. I don't have the time for it. I am just trying to keep our farm afloat. And so in terms of the village, building a village, forget it. There's not enough interest. I'm not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste Richard's time, and I'm not going to waste, Rich Sheetman's time. I'm not going to waste your time as well. So we'll teach you. We'll teach you things on the radio. We'll teach you things from the book. We'll share our experiences. But in terms of sticking my neck out, putting my money on the line for a wish for people who I can't depend on, forget it. I'm sorry to say it that way. Cathy's with us. Welcome, Cathy.
Good morning, Vince. How are you?
I'm a little frosted, but because what I'm watching is the American populace just has become so weak. So weak. I actually thought that the Civil War would be raging by now, but it's not. People have just said, Our rights are being trampled. We're being spied on from above and left and right and from forward and behind. And we've got license plate scanners and we've got surveillance everywhere. We're being tracked by the banks, the companies that sell us things, our credit cards. And I thought people would just absolutely have had it. And, with the new bill in Congress to register and, tax our guns, I thought, people would just come unglued. No, it's okay. People just don't seem to mind. And so we become a nation of pansies. And if our enemies worldwide knew how weak we were, they just walk over us. It's awful. And Cathy, we can't even get people to pay attention to the sale price of cans of corn and buy, more than one can. It's unbelievable how weak we have become. Am I saying anything that seems foreign to you?
No, I've had the same problem. I just had a conversation with my son this morning, and we both said we're not mentioning it anymore. If people ask about it, we'll be more than happy to share our thoughts or teach, but I'm not going to waste my time anymore. I'd love to help them, but they just don't care. So, I'm like you, Vince. I kind of given up with mentioning it. Just even people that I know that know what's going on, I don't know if it's just too much work, but they just don't want to do anything.
Cathy, at our house, if we want to have heat in the winter, we have to think about that at least 9 months ahead of that time. We have to go out and pull in the firewood, the dead tree limbs, cut down the trees that are about falling over, cut them up, put them in the sun, dry them out, split them, whatever we have to do. That's what we do 9 months or more before we want to use that wood, to dry it out. Then, we haul it and stack it and we cover it up so that rain stays off it so it stays dry. And then we can burn it, almost a year later. So it is hard. It's thousands and thousands of pounds of wood just to heat the hot water for showers and, the kitchen and the dishwasher and heating the house with, a hydronic, heating system. That's what this lifestyle is about. It's planning. And that's why we know things that other people don't know, because they have no clue. They have no clue what this lifestyle is like. I mean, I think they live vicariously. Some people live vicariously through what we talk about and they go, boy, that'd be pretty cool to do that. But it takes work. I mean, it's 24 hours a day. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about things that I need to do that I know I'm never going to get to do because I don't have the time to do the things that are in front of that. Is it like that for you too, Cathy?
Yeah, I can't sleep very well at night either. I'm the same way. And, I listened to the beginning of the show yesterday with Kyle, and it really resonated with me, the same exactly what he was saying, that I think probably most of the instructors here grew up having to figure things out and to fix things and to have more than one plan. You just didn't have the money to go get it. And I grew up like that too. And now in a way I'm glad because I'm always thinking about how can I do this better? If I don't have this, what's my substitution? And I can think that way, but I'm the same way. There's so many things I need to do that I'll never get them done, but I just try to prioritize now.
Yeah, we have daily meetings here at the house, actually, every meal. And I assign somebody around the table to be the note taker, to take the list, write down the list, and here are the things that I'm suggesting. And so we go around the kitchen table, and we say, okay, and I pick a different person to be first each time. It's kind of like grace. I assign somebody to say grace, and that person says grace. That's just the way it is. I'm the head of the household, and as long as I'm alive, it's going to be like that. Well, I assign someone to be first and make suggestions. What do we need? What do we need to fix? What is the priority? What do you think, is first? And then we go around the table and then we have one person who's the secretary that takes the notes and then we follow up and make sure we get those things done. That's the way it is. And that's the way it is in business. I mean, people don't go into a business meeting, at the conference room, where they work and, just have a free for all. Somebody's in charge and somebody says, okay, you go first. Here's what's on the agenda. What do you guys think? I mean, that's the way it's done. That's the way we operate our farm. That's the way we operate our family. So class, you can do that. I mean, you can manage your family as if it's a business, and you should. That doesn't mean beat people up, but it means encourage them to pull their own weight and do their fair share. Because if they don't, they will be ostracized by the family. And you don't want that to happen. So what I do is I encourage everybody to speak his or her mind succinctly. And, nobody wastes anybody's time because, there'll be some comments across the kitchen table if they did. So it's succinct, it's well thought out, and there's an action plan, and we do it. And the responsibilities. Okay, so you thought of that. You own it. Get it done. Tell us tomorrow what happened. You need any help? We'll help you. Who do you want to help you? Who should help you? Who's the best person to help you? And does that person have time? That's the way it goes. Any comments about that, Cathy?
Vince, I think you always have to be thinking what you need to do ahead. It's like you said with planning for your firewood. If you don't plan for it and you don't have it, then you're not going to be able to have heat in your house. Here's an example where I think people just are not aware. A couple of weeks ago, I did go to our country grocery store for some essentials, and they have a section where they have markdowns. And I saw this in the markdown section. They had yeast marked down. They had flour marked down, dog food, canned goods, all the things that I would look at and say, this is what you should be stocking up on. But it was all the things that were there, like people bought when the whole shutdown first happened, and now they must have too much of it, and people aren't buying it. So I snagged a whole bunch of it. I got stuff between 70 and 80% off, most of it, just because I know I'm going to use it, but I just think people the same thing's going to happen again if we go have another lockdown or the economy keeps going the way it is. I just don't know how people are going to be able to afford groceries with just the price that's going up right now.
I absolutely positively agree with you. And so if a can of corn is on sale for 50 cents, sometimes it's 39. If it's on sale, why not buy a case, which would be 12? Why not? If you have 4 people in the house and all you had was this case of corn, and you said, let's have a can for each meal. We'll have 1 can for breakfast, 1 can for lunch, 1 can for dinner. That case would last 1 day.
Yep.
So that's the reality of it. So class, you can buy when it's on sale. I do not recommend wasting money. As a matter of fact, I get hives just thinking about wasting money. I have a serious allergic reaction to wasting money. I can't do it. If I don't think that I got it for the best available price, I'm not really satisfied. And that brings me to one other thing before we go into the break, and that is giving money away. I listen to corporations saying we need your money, like the Red Cross and other companies. Yeah. And why would you do that? Why would you give money to a bottomless pit where you have no idea where it's going? Just take care of yourself and your family and your friends. That's it, period. Cathy, just one quick comment. So in the good old days, when I used to go to the big city like Springfield, Missouri, they would have these beggars on the intersections, where the traffic lights were. And they would beg for money, and they staked out and claimed certain intersections. So you'd see the same guy or the same gal on the intersection every day. So it's like they had their own territories. And so I happened to be at one of these intersections, and I pulled into Lowe's, the home supply company. And I saw this car parked in the corner of the parking lot, right near the intersection, about maybe 500 feet away, maybe 1,000 feet away. And in this car were signs, cardboard signs, like sign of the day. Help me, I'm hungry. Help me, I have 2 daughters. Help me, all those kinds of things. and a change of clothes, which is change of costumes. So this guy had a nice car. This was a business. This was a begging business. So if you looked at him on the corner, you'd say, oh, poor guy, he's dirty, he's filthy. But if you looked at his car, you'd say, this doesn't sync up. This guy is turned begging into a business. So what I'm saying to you, class, is be really careful where you send your money. Is it going into a bottomless pit? Is it going to airline tickets? Is it going where you think it's going? Is it going into new cars? Is it going into restaurants? Where is it going? Would you spend your money the way that the person or the company who is receiving your money is spending your money? Just like that guy at the restaurant. When we had meetups, there was a guy who'd be at the restaurant and he didn't have a lot of money. So I would say to this is when I was running the meetups for 5 years. I would say to the head waitress, see that guy over there in the red shirt? Whatever he orders, I'll pay for that. And what I would do is Mrs. Finelli and I, instead of us having a meal each, I would say, Mrs. Finelli and I will split one meal. So Mrs. Finelli and I typically would have our own meal, but no, we would split one and give the other one to this guy. And then one day I saw that he kept ordering bigger and bigger and more expensive meals. Something that I would never order. I might order a hamburger and he'd order something that, cost 2 or 3 times as much. Then one day, I saw that he had 2 mixed drinks, got there early, had 2 mixed drinks and had this great big plate of, very expensive food. And I said to the waitress, he's on his own. Okay. That's abuse. So I didn't do it anymore. That was it. That was the end of it. So what I'm saying is make sure you know where your money's going. Any comments about that, Cathy, before we go into the topic of the day?
Oh, I agree, Vince. I've seen it too. We had a friend who has a grass cutting business, landscaping, and he stopped at the corner of one of these guys, and he asked him, hey, I can pay you $12, $13 an hour, and I need help, just seasonal. And the guy said, nope. He said, I can make more standing here than I can. I'm not going to give up this for $12 or $13 an hour. So I'm like you, Vince. I've seen too many stories of our local United Way. The guy, somehow there was fraud of almost $700,000 for the guy who ran it. He spent the money. So I agree with you. People I know, friends and family that are in need, maybe I take my money if somebody's sick and in the hospital, and I take that money and make them a couple meals, or I buy them something that they need. It makes more sense to me than just going into a bottomless pit.
I love what you just said. You take the money, and I don't believe you said you give them the money. I believe you said you take the money and make them a meal. That's the way to do it. Okay? Do what you would do with the money, not leave it up to their devices to do whatever they want with the money that you work so hard for. Well said. Cathy, where would you like to start? We're going to talk about coffee and bread today.
Vince, can we talk about making bread first?
I'd love to.
Okay, well, just a little update. My first encounter with a bread maker was clear back, and you probably remember the name of DAK, D-A-K.
Absolutely. That stood for Drew Allen Kaplan. That was the guy's name. Mm-hmm. And he formed this company, a catalog company called DAK. Yep. Please continue. We got about 10 seconds before the break.
Well, I got my first bread maker, I think it was 1991. And so I'll finish after that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Drew Allen Kaplan's company, I believe, was back in the 70s when I was at the university. Cathy and I'll be right back. We're going to teach you about coffee and making bread. Cathy's with us, and we're going to talk about making your own bread. Cathy?
Yeah, Vince, back in 1991, I believe, my husband got the DAK catalog, and he surprised me. And back then, it was a circular bread maker. It had a glass dome on it. And it was expensive. I think it was $250 or something, which was a lot of money for us back then. But with 4 kids, he said, well, if you make bread every couple days, it'll pay for itself in probably easily a year. So I had that for probably 10 years, And then it just died. He took it apart and we couldn't get the part for it. And it just wouldn't bake. I think it was the heating element, and he checked. So we got rid of it. And I got a different one. But that was my first introduction to it. And that was really the best one that I had. Now, none of the other ones I had were real expensive. I had a well-built, and I think I had a T-fall. Right now, I have another well-built, and that one's doing well. That bakes pretty well. I know yours. I think you had that. I'm not sure of the pronunciation, Vince, of the type that you have.
We have a couple. Lou Cassidy gave us one that he found at a flea market or something like that. Lou Cassidy, the instructor. And we also have a Zozoruchi, begins with the letter Z. It's made in Japan, and it's a completely automatic, and we use them both. So one makes a vertical loaf, one makes a horizontal loaf. The Zozoruchi heats the water, and all you do is you put the ingredients in it, and you press like one of the buttons to, the darkness level that you want. And 2 hours and 34 minutes later, it's done. That's the Zozoruchi. The other one, the vertical loaf, you heat the water first, put the ingredients in it, and it's automatic from there. So they're both outstanding. So the point is, well, Cathy, you use the term pay for itself. That's break even. That's the break even point. So if you end up getting one of these used for $15 at a thrift store, the break even point is just like a couple weeks, and with making bread. So please continue.
Well, I guess one of the things that I would say is if you have one, you need to work with it. Sometimes it depends on the bread maker, and it depends on the recipes. I've had one bread maker, I can use the recipe, and it comes out nice. And then I use the same recipe in another bread maker, and it doesn't come out as nice, or it falls, or it's too dense. So I have a recipe card or recipe book. I have a couple of them. I got them long time ago at Sam's. They were called the Bread Machine Cookbook. And the lady's name was Donna Rathmel German, as like the country, Germany. But it's just German. So I got the first one, and then I've got the fifth one. And those have all different kinds. They have sweet bread, raisin bread, whole wheat, and you can add all different kind of ingredients. But what I do, if I'm trying one, I follow it exactly when I first put all the ingredients in, and then I assess it. And if there's something wrong with it, then I start tweaking the recipe. I either write it in pencil or I use a Post-it note if I make any changes. But if you have your bread machine, they have a Teflon pan. And just make sure you don't use anything in it. Just use a washcloth and some mild soap. Don't use any scratching brushes or like Scotch-Brite pads or anything like that, because you don't want to damage that. Your bread won't come out. It's got a little paddle in the bottom, and if you spray that with oil, it comes out. If you just twist it back and forth, it comes out. And if you spray it with oil, then it comes out easily. Now, my thought was on a lot of mine, they said don't submerge them. So I never submerge them in the hot soapy water. I just pour a little soap in there. When I'm done, I rinse it out and dry it, and you let spray the paddle with oil again and put it back in the pan. But so that's just a caution, so you don't ruin your pan. But what I do is, like Vince says, to heat the water. Some say you don't have to, but I just use my filtered water we have a reverse osmosis, so I use that, and I just warm it up a little bit in my tea kettle, which is just, I only have water in there. So I just warm it up so it's lukewarm, not hot. If it's hot, the yeast, it probably won't raise well because you might kill the yeast. So I just warm it up to lukewarm water, and I measure everything as exact as I can get it. I've seen some videos that people just use like a regular tablespoon out of the drawer, and they pour it in there. I don't do that. I use a tablespoon, and I have a little, like a little spatula that you just scrape it off so everything is level and exact, and I find it comes out better. But typically your recipe will say, it'll either say put the water in first and then go up, and then your liquid ingredients go first, and then you put your salt and sugar or butter, whatever, and then your flour, and then you put the yeast on the top. You don't want the yeast to be with the water initially. You want to make sure those are separate. So follow the instructions on your bread making book, but typically it's the water and the liquid ingredients, and then the whatever seasonings, whether it's the salt or sugar, then your flour, and then your yeast. And then you just push your button, whatever you want, you got to look at the size of the loaf. So let's say it's a 1.5 pound loaf, and you hit that size. Now, I stand and watch it for the first couple minutes. I let it start kneading. And then, because it's going to take a while, probably take 3, 4, 5 minutes before you really get a good feel of it. If it looks like it's really banging around in your bread maker, where it's sounds like it's knocking, you don't have enough liquid. So I'll take maybe a teaspoon at a time. If it's really dry, then I'll just do a tablespoon, and then I keep a record of it. If it's too sloppy, where it's not even forming a ball, then you don't have enough flour. Then I'll add a tablespoon at a time. I'll add a tablespoon, I'll wait a minute. And I just have a rubber spatula that I very carefully push it down, and I kind of watch it. Once it gets to kneading, probably after the first 6, 7 minutes, then you have a pretty good idea whether your dough is forming in a ball. And the way to explain it when you're looking at it, it should be a smooth, a non-sticky, non-crumbly ball of dough when it's kneading. If it's too crumbly or it's too sticky, then you have to adjust it with the flour and the water. And then I just kind of play with the recipe. If it doesn't come out, then a lot of the recipe books, and you can even find them online, they have a little problem-solving section. It will say bread didn't raise too high, bread rose and then collapsed. So sometimes it's too much sugar, it's not enough salt. So it's more of a thing of just experimenting. And even to this day, to be honest, I'll have recipes that I used before and they just don't come out. I think sometimes it just has something to do with the humidity of the house or where you put your bread maker. I try to put it in a corner where there's not a lot of activity, not a lot of doors opening and closing. So that's just kind of like a primer. But one of the things I learned really not too long ago was when you have your flour in your container, just stir it a little bit with a spoon and then scoop it in your measuring cup. Because if you just take your measuring cup and dip it in there, then the flour is so heavy that it doesn't get any air in the flour, and that makes your bread too dense. So you just want to take any kind of a spoon, wooden spoon, and just then when you scoop it in your measuring cup, do it a couple tablespoons at a time. Just don't go in there and just scoop it like you would if you were scooping out grain or something. And then you want to level it off. And so if you just kind of take your time and line everything up on your counter, and I try to have my things at room temperature, even if I have to put an egg in there. I'll put it in a little dish of warm water with the shell on for a few minutes and take some of the chill off. And then I put all my ingredients in the order that is received, that they say. So I think that sometimes too, if you have time and you want to put all your ingredients in the pan, let it sit there for maybe 10, 15 minutes. I find it raises better. It kind of gives the ingredients a chance to sort of just maybe settle down. If I'm in a hurry, I just go ahead and push the button. But that's just some of the tips that I can give you. I kind of have pages of them because I've been making it for probably 30, 35 years now. But just don't be afraid to try it. And the other thing, too, is you can use your yeast. I buy the big packages of yeast. They're 1 pound packages at Sam's. You can get them online now. And then I just keep I keep a small one in the refrigerator, and then the basement, I put it in the best airtight container that I have. And it I've never had it fail that way. It just lasts, and you're not spending a ton of money on yeast. So that really keeps the cost down. I don't think I spend more than 50 cents a loaf, and that's if I maybe add raisins or chopped up nuts or something like that. Might increase the cost a little bit. I don't know about you, Vince. What does your cost come out to?
Well, I was trying to figure that out, and I asked Mrs. Finelli. We buy the 25-pound bag of flour at Sam's Club. It's about $7 and change. I'm thinking that a loaf of bread is somewhere around 25 cents, just for a plain loaf, French recipe. And what we do is, we put it in, and we bought a roll of those bags, actually a couple of rolls of those bags that they have at the fresh produce section of supermarkets. They're on a roll in thin plastic bags. We bought a couple of rolls, so we have them. And we take the bread once it cools off after it's out of the machine, it's done baking. We put it in that bag so it doesn't get real hard and quickly, because it will. And so that's how we store it. And if we don't finish it before it gets hard, we slice off with a serrated knife slices, and then cut them into like domino-sized cubes for the dogs, and we tell the dogs they're biscuits. So nothing goes to waste. We buy the same yeast that you do, $5, $4.98 for 32 ounces, 2 pounds at Sam's. It works great. It stores a long time. And we use very simple bread recipes. So it's a great way to go. I believe you'll be cutting the cost of making bread down to 1/8 of what you would spend if you went to the supermarket and bought bread. Do you think that's about right, Cathy, for just a plain loaf of bread?
Oh yeah. If you buy everything in bulk, your flour, you don't use too much sugar, but the flour and the yeast is probably the two things that you can buy in bulk the most, and you really do. There's so much variety that you can have. I've got a wonderful rye bread recipe. Vince, I can explain it more when we get back, but I found something online that I ordered, and it's a clear plastic box that you can put your bread in, and people are really speaking highly of it. So I'll talk more about it when we get back.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have some time to talk about coffee and how you can drive your coffee down to almost nothing in terms of cost. We'll be right back. Cathy's with us, and we're talking about bread. Cathy, please continue.
Okay, the container that I was talking about, it's called Prep Works by Progressive Bread Pro Keeper. And it just looks like a plastic box that's about the shape of a loaf of bread, and it's got 2 small holes on the end of it. Now, people online I was reading said they really like it. It keeps their bread moister. I don't know. I have always just done like you, Vince. I always have just sealed it in plastic and tried to get as much of the air out as I can. And if I can't use it right away, then I'll freeze it. But I'll even double bag it. I'll use a plastic bag and get as much air out, and then twist it off with a twisty tie, and then I'll put it in like a Ziploc freezer bag. And that keeps pretty well that way. I wanted to mention a couple things. One lady, she had a Ziploc bag, and she took a straw and left a little opening, and then she just drew the air out with the straw, and she really did get a lot of the air out. So she said that helped her keep the bread fresh in the cupboard or in the freezer. Another thing, if you're going to make wheat bread, if you use 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, that helps to keep it fresher, and it seems to help the wheat bread rise better. The other one I haven't tried. To be honest, I forgot about it, but they say to keep it moist, you can take 1 to 2 tablespoons of oat flour, or just take oatmeal and grind it up like in a small coffee grinder. And that's supposed to help it. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm actually going to try it today when we get off the air. I want to see how that works. The couple things, if you have a bread maker, you can use it for other things. It has a dough selection on it. So you can use it to make your own pizza crust or your own rolls. But sometimes maybe you want to make a loaf of French bread, or maybe it doesn't bake right. So you can just always just use the dough selection, take it out, and let it raise and bake it yourself. Just put it in your own pan. Now, my husband and I, we make Polish coffee cakes every Easter and every Christmas. So one of the things that we do when we want to raise them is we take a long electric heating pad, we plug it in, put it down low on the counter, we put like a terry cloth towel down, and we line up all the coffee cakes in the pans, and I found a Rubbermaid container that's about 12 inches high, and it's pretty long. It's about 30, maybe 6 inches long, and we line them all up and we let them raise. That way I can watch it. But you don't have to get that big of one because we make like 7 or 8 at a time. But you can just use like a big plastic shoebox or something so you can keep the heat in and keep an eye on it, and then you can just bake them. So that way, if you still want to make your own bread and for some reason your bread machine is not baking right or is not heating, you can still utilize it just for the ability for it to knead. So I have done that with just taking them out. I just would rather just have like the horizontal loaf.
Okay, we use lemon juice, and I'm going to experiment with the oatmeal too. Do we have a couple minutes to talk about coffee? Maybe. Can we move into coffee?
Sure.
Okay.
Vince, you go ahead with what you know, and then if I have anything to add, I'll chime in.
Okay, I'll go really quickly. So, class,
okay.
The average cup of coffee at Starbucks is about $2. And you can make your own coffee for about 5 cents a cup at home. We bought about 8 years ago a coffee maker made by Black & Decker. It was at the Chinese factory outlet. It's about $15. Still going strong. It's a basic one. It's a 12-cup model glass carafe, and we're careful with it, so we haven't broken the carafe, and it just works. We clean it with white vinegar. Run it through you can look that up on the internet. And it works really, really well. So if you buy coffee in the large, roughly 50-ounce size, you'll end up with a can of it. Sam's Club coffee is fine with us. And by the time you're all done with the electricity, the coffee, the 1 drop of soap to clean out the reusable filter, the gold tone stainless steel filter, you're at about 5 cents a cup. So it seems to me to be crazy to not do that. And then you can control what goes into your coffee. You can control the water. You can control the kind of coffee. So I have in front of me the Gold Tone basket. It's called Gold Tone. You can get them at the Chinese factory outlet. You can get them online. They're about $5 or $6. They're guaranteed for 5 years, and you reuse them. And because it's not paper, you don't have the chemicals that are used to bleach the paper. So you avoid those toxins. And it's a great, great way to go. But make sure you rinse the coffee basket, the reusable filter very well. Kathy, very quickly, we're almost out of time. Any comments?
Yeah, Vince, and make sure that you clean your machine with the vinegar, and you, like, whatever they tell you. We've got a bun, and we have to run that. There's like a rod that works up in there, and it gets rid of all the lines. Yep. And use cold filtered water too.
Yes, do not use hot water in the coffee maker because it has the anode rods from the hot water heater in it. You'll be poisoning yourself if you do. Kathy, so thanks so much. We'll have to do this again. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Little change in topics. Bert Bertonis is with us, and we're going to be teaching a class about the stock market. And I'm really looking forward to hearing, because there's been a lot of discussion about GameStop and the rise up and the subsequent fall. And it's difficult for many people to understand what this is all about. Welcome, Bert.
Hey, Vince. When you picked that song, The Wall Street Shuffle, did you ever think we'd be having this topic in this show?
First of all, when I picked that was my absolute favorite song at the university. Yeah. The Wall Street Shuffle by 10cc. And I got the single, the 45 of it. and I recorded it on a cassette over and over and over and over. And that way I could preserve the vinyl and just hit the play button and listen to it, I think about 7 times on this cassette deck when we were at the university. And that's what I did. So we had in our university housing, we had a stereo system and a cassette deck and speakers, and off it went over and over and over and over again, right?
Yep. So
Wall Street Shuffle.
Yep. So as we speak, GameStop is up $20 a share, but we're not going to go there yet. Let's back up. And what I'd like to do is discuss what is short selling, because it's a little bit of an abstract concept, and I'd like to try and make it understandable for the class in very simple terms. So let's go there first. So we all understand what it's like to own a share of stock, and so short selling can only be done when it's public stock, because think about it. Maybe 50 years ago, when you bought stock in a public company, you actually got the shares, correct? I mean, they used to mail them out to you maybe 50 or 60 years ago, but no more. Your shares are held by the broker, and you basically just get an electronic receipt. So those shares, and this has been going on for over 100 years, those shares can be taken from you by your broker, given to another customer who then sells them in the open market. So essentially, there's now 2 owners of the same exact shares. Let's say you own 100 shares of Apple Computer. Your broker takes them, gives them to another customer who immediately sells them, and now there's actually 2 customers who think they own those same 100 shares of Apple Computer. And you can even do it a third time, as long as your broker can get a hold of your shares. So what it does is it creates more shareholders for a given company than actually exist. So any questions so far, or any points you want to make before I go further?
No, I think you're doing a great job, but this is probably very unsettling to someone who's thinking that they bought something and they actually own it. It's very unsettling.
It's almost worse than that, because the company itself, they have more shareholders now than they really signed up for. And in fact, I asked my broker once, I said, hey, when they have the annual meeting, and let's say there's 1,000 shareholders, but 1,500 people expect to vote, what happens? And he said, that's a great question. And he checked with some people in New York, and he said, a lot of shares are held by the brokerage firms themselves. So right off, those shares don't vote. But on top of that, your vote may actually not count. You may think you're casting a vote. You may put down who you think you're voting for officers or for board resolutions or anything like that. But in effect, some of those votes get tossed out and you're not really even voting. So there's a lot of issues to this. Why does it go on? Well, it goes on for a simple reason. The brokerage firms make money on this, and obviously in aggregate, the short sellers are making money. And but by the way, if you're thinking this through, you might ask, well, hey, if you sell these shares short, you get to keep the money you get for them. The answer is no. The brokerage firm keeps that money. In fact, not only does the brokerage firm keep the money, they charge the short seller interest on the value of their short position. So the brokerage firms love it because they're making a lot of money. They've created more trades. They're making interest themselves on the money they keep, and they're charging the short seller a high interest rate on top of that. So they love it. For 100 years, the short sellers and the Wall Street industry has been saying it serves a good purpose because, it helps weed out bad companies and find things that are going wrong. But if you think about it, the short sellers aren't doing this out of altruism. They're doing it to make money and they're selling this stock into the open market. They don't have any qualms about someone else buying these shares. If they're so sure it's a bad company or the shares are going down, why are they selling them to unsuspected new customers? So their argument, we're serving a really good purpose in the economy. I think you have to question some of those motives.
Well, you said that very politely. Absolutely. Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, so that's basically what short selling is. So I'm setting the sort of the lay of the land for what happened with GameStop and the Reddit revolution. So a lot of stocks have very high short positions, and GameStop was one of them. I mean, there's lots of companies that have short positions just because people are what we call hedging. In other words, they'll take both long and short positions at the simultaneous. And that brings us to hedge funds. So for the past 20 or 30 years, I mean, probably longer than that, but they got popular maybe 20 or 30 years ago, hedge funds form that basically go to investors and say, hey, we don't care which direction the stock market's going to go. We're going to be both long and short. And everyone has their different formula. So I'm not going to say every hedge fund does it this way, but kind of the model is to have half your positions long, half your positions short. And then basically what they say is we don't care what direction the market's going to go. You're going to make money no matter what, because we're going to be short the worst companies and long the best companies. You know, and I've kind of simplified it a little. And not every formula is like that. There are some hedge funds that only go long and only own shares and don't short, and there's others that specialize in commodities or different types of financial instruments. But in terms of what we're talking about with the news, these are hedge funds that have significant short positions. And, you know, normally a lot of those short positions work out, but in the current environment where the stock market is booming, not so much. So these short positions to begin with have not been doing well. But then on top of that, a lot of people on Reddit formed a group and started saying, hey, if we can identify the companies that have extremely high short positions, and this information does have to get disclosed weekly, we could create what's called a short squeeze. And what a short squeeze is when short sellers have to cover their position frequently at a loss. And if you think about it, if you own a stock, you can only lose 100% of what you invested. But let's say you're short a stock and you shorted it at $10 a share. If that stock goes to $20, you're out basically 100%. And in fact, there's no limit to what you can lose. If that stock goes from $10 to $100, you're losing like 1,000% of what you invested. That's 10 times. And in terms of GameStop, that's exactly what happened. Typically these hedge funds were short at $5 or $10 a share, and the stock went into the hundreds, and they panicked, and they had to buy scarce shares, and we saw what in fact unfolded, a classic short squeeze.
Can we just go back a little bit? And you've mentioned long and short. So my understanding from when I received my degree, or degrees in finance and economics, long is the traditional concept. You buy it low and you sell it high. So you buy the stock for $1. You hope that the company does well, improves, comes out with new products. This is the old system of maybe 50, 100 years ago. The company has goodwill. The price of the shares goes up. People are betting on the come, meaning betting on, what may happen in the future. So they buy it for $1 and hope to sell it for more. That would be going long. Going short is selling it high. Something that you borrow, stock that you borrow, sell it for $10 and hope that you can buy it back later, buy it later for $1, right? Isn't that the difference?
No, that's exactly it. And in fact, indeed, some of these companies do end up even going out of business, meaning you buy it back at zero. So that's basically it. But let's go back to where I started. Why do we even have the ability for someone to sell a stock short? What purpose does it even serve for the public good, for society, and specifically for the economy? And I think there's a lot of people who are now saying it doesn't serve any purpose. Because like I said, if you think a company is fraudulent, there's other ways you can alert the public. And there's also options which you can trade in, and I don't want to get into the nuances of stock options, but there's other vehicles where you can make money if you think a stock is going up or down. So you don't have to have short selling. But in terms of what public good it does, I think there's a lot of smart people who are now saying it has no public good, because all it is a mechanism for people on Wall Street, large funds and traders, to make money on trying to hope a company goes down in price. And, of course, the Wall Street firms, like I said, they make money both on the cash that comes in from selling those shares. They keep that cash and use it, invest it, and they charge the short seller interest. Now, I will say that, I personally own some stocks. And by the way, let me disclose, I don't own any of the stocks we're talking about today. And we're not recommending that people go out and buy these stocks. We're not recommending them, and we're not, I personally have no position in any of these companies. But I will say that with Charles Schwab, who I have an account with, if I agree to allow my shares to be shorted, they will pay me the interest, which is kind of makes it a little better.
Okay, hold that thought. Bert Bertonis is with us, and class, in terms of full disclosure, I have zero stock, zero municipal bonds, zero paper silver, zero paper gold. The only investments that I have are tangibles, things like land, the farm, machines, farm equipment, implements, tractors, trailers, to operate the farm, and farm animals. And that's it. Other than an account to pay the bills. Other than that, the Finelli family owns zero stock. And the reason is, I learned something called Max's Law many, many years ago. Max's Law is buy the best, pay cash, take delivery. So I am of the opinion, I did own stock. And I was certified by the university to be of some level of understanding. And I realized that the stock market is manipulated to a degree that I have no way of competing with that, or even understanding the level of manipulations, like high frequency trading, etc. And these Wall Street brokers, these Wall Street companies, like Bear Stearns, they are corrupt. They run Ponzi schemes. There's no question about it. Jeffrey Epstein was running a Ponzi scheme for Bear Stearns. They hired Jeffrey Epstein to run the Ponzi scheme because they said his moral compass was upside down. Seriously. No kidding about that. So I don't own any stock. So in terms of, am I recommending that you buy stock? Absolutely, positively not. It's a swamp. It's dangerous. Bert, would you disagree or agree with that for the average person?
Well, actually, Ben, I'll probably disagree with you a little bit. I fully agree that insiders have the system rigged, and there's a lot of issues with Wall Street, so no disagreement there. But what I will say is something I've believed in my entire life, that owning stock is a good thing because you're owning a piece of the economy. So I've owned stock most of my life and my career. When I've had money that I can invest, I have. And I've generally done well, not as a stock trader, but as a long-term investor. So I do own shares in some well-known Silicon Valley companies. I've diversified, so I also own some other stocks in other industries, and generally I've done well. But again, as an investor, not as a trader, because I believe history shows that in the very long term, in fact, there's a book called Stocks for the Long Term. I recommend it to our listeners, that it does pay off in the long term to own a piece of the U.S. economy.
That is different from the perspective of most people, because you are in the heart of Silicon Valley, and you have been for since the 70s, and you're a major technical player in terms of your contributions to what's happening in developments in Silicon Valley. So you fully understand, and you rub elbows with people who are in these companies with whom you are participating and supporting by buying a fraction of the company, by going long, which means investing for the long run rather than trying to make a killing as if like using the stock market as a lottery. So that's completely different. But you have a thorough understanding of the businesses and the companies of which you are buying shares, correct?
That's correct. But let me add to that and say that it's important to be diversified. So besides Silicon Valley stocks, and I own a couple of the big names that you'd recognize, I also own shares in oil and gas industry, in natural gas in particular, which I think is a good fuel for the future because it's clean, and natural gas pipeline, which I think is a good diversification. And again, we're not here to talk about personal investment strategy, but I will say that I've generally done best when I've bought things that were out of favor. And if you are going to diversify and sell anything, then sell something that's maybe in favor and consider buying something that's a little bit out of favor after you do your research on the fundamentals.
And so what you're saying is there's more potential for the upside if it's out of favor and it comes back in favor. For example, Apple Computer back in the 90s was in the dumps, and wow, I mean, if you bought Apple Computer at, I don't know, less than $30, you did really, really well now, right? That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. And class, one more time, we are not recommending buying any shares of anything, okay? This is just a general discussion about how the system works. We'll be right back with Bert Bertonis. Bert Bertonis is with us. Bert, just a side comment. Back when we lived in Virginia, I bought a dishwasher from Sears. It was a Kenmore. It was their top of the line. And they had a store that was closing. It was a small Sears store in the city, and it was closing in another state. And I happened to be there, and it was like $500 for a top-of-the-line programmable dishwasher. So we bought it and put it in our house in Virginia, and it started leaking all over the floor, after I first hooked it up. So I called Sears, and they sent out the guy, the service guy, and he said, you need a new tub. He put a new tub in, then the control board blew. And so this was like every 2 weeks this thing was failing. And finally they couldn't get any more control boards. And I called Sears and I said, look, this thing isn't working. They said, well, bring it back where you got it. And I said, I can't. You guys closed the store. So I talked to the store manager in Lynchburg, Virginia. It was a big Sears store at the time. And I said, I'd like to come in. He said, well, we're having a big sale, on the weekend, and you can get one you get a replacement. So I picked out one that I thought was a mechanical, good mechanical device and mechanical timer, etc. And it was $347. And so I said, okay, how about I get this one? He said, okay, you can have that one. And I said, well, wait, what about my refund and the difference from the $500 that I spent for the first one? He said, no, we're not going to do that. So I said, all right, I'll buy two. I'll take two of them and I'll pay you for the difference. And I gave one to my parents. So we had these two identical dishwashers. Now, during that discussion, I was really frustrated. And I said, what's going on? What's with Sears? When I worked at Sears in the 1970s, it was satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. And I had to fight to get this thing swapped out. I mean, it was a uphill struggle. And here's the salient point of what I'm saying. He said to me, well, when you worked at Sears back in the 70s, it was a different company. We don't work for the customers. We work for the shareholders. We work for the shareholders. So customers are kind of like a sideline to their business, an afterthought. And that's what I believe is a big reason why Sears, Roebuck and Company has fallen apart and gone bankrupt. Any comments about the difference between when you and I went to school for our master's degree in finance and economics? We were taught that, you had to be a good steward. You had to make a good product, good service. You can't lie and cheat and steal from your customers. You had to be honest. You have to have integrity. You had to honor your warranties. You just can't fleece the flock. That's what we were taught. But that's not the case anymore, is it, Bert?
Well, you know what? I don't think there's anything wrong with working for the shareholders. The problem is that's what corporate managements are not doing. They're working for themselves. They're in many cases inflating stock prices through tricks on how they report earnings to get bonuses. You look at some of the salaries of large corporation CEOs, and you wonder, is there, like somebody getting paid $10 million a year? You wonder, isn't there someone just as capable who would do that job for $5 million a year or $3 million a year? So it's crazy. And again, I'd say it's not so much working for the shareholder, which I think is how it should be, and of course the customer. But the managements are really working for themselves.
There's no disagreement. And we see that in Jeff Bezos, and we see that in Disney, and we see that in all of these guys who are making, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in compensation and stock options. So it is incumbent upon them, if they have personal greed, which they all seem to do, to inflate the stock price any way they can so that they can cash out and sell at a high price. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's true. Unless you get into one of these situations we're talking about with short sellers, and they pick your company to decide to sell short, you're in big trouble. And if we have time, I want to tell you a true story how I was hurt 10 years ago in a company that was totally fine company who you'd recognize the name, but short sellers drove them almost to the point of going out of business. That was
let's do it. Let's do it. I think that'd be worth learning about.
Yeah. So in fact, they made a movie about this, but it was Sirius Radio. Short sellers pounded that stock relentlessly, and I owned it. And that one day, Jim Cramer, if you know who he is, went on CNBC and said, there's only two choices for this company. They're either going to go bankrupt and shareholders will get nothing, or they're going to get taken over and shareholders will get nothing because the price will be so low, it'll just be maybe some debt holders paid. Well, neither of those happened. It actually got bailed out by a big entrepreneur named John Malone, saved them at the last minute. The stock had gotten as low as 10 cents a share, actually below that, and the company was saved. And, I don't have a current quote on the stock, but it's, if you held on, you did okay. Unfortunately, a lot of people got scared out of their shares, and the short sellers in aggregate did well because they all covered at low prices and made money, and it was the average person who owned the shares who really lost out on that. And there was really nothing wrong with the company, except the short sellers were forcing them to have a very low stock price, and they did need to raise cash, and they couldn't do it at 10 cents a share. So it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy to force the company out of business. And it's a true story from 2009, 2010.
Did you see that YouTube video of Jim Cramer and it's like a conference room or the lunchroom, and he was talking about how he and his buddies manipulated stock? Did you ever see that?
No, but I will say there's been some studies done on his track record, and it's not very good.
Well, here's what he said. Here it is in a nutshell. He said that he and his buddies would they would manipulate the stock. They would drive the price down, and they'd place a call. One of the guys would call the trading floor, and they'd say, did you hear anything about Apple? And it looks like they're going to miss their forecast. The product isn't going to come out on time. Did you hear about that? And then another guy would call another trader on the floor and say, have you heard anything about Apple? And then another guy would do that. And then what would happen is these guys would talk among themselves. Did you hear about Apple? No, I heard a rumor about Apple. Did you hear about? Yeah, I heard it. It must be real. It must be real because all three of us or all four or five or six of us heard this rumor about Apple. And they would drive the price down, and Cramer and his buddies would make money by driving the price down through false information. You can look it up on YouTube. It's there, unless it's been removed. Absolutely true. Now, please continue, Bert.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what was going on with these hedge funds. Is they, a lot of these companies, I'm not going to say that they didn't have maybe some issues. I mean, you look at AMC, obviously people aren't going to movie theaters like they used to. GameStop, people aren't going in buying video games like they used to. But it doesn't mean that these companies have to go out of business. And in some cases, like I said, with SiriusXM, it almost became a self-fulfilling prophecy in that they forced the shares so low the company can't raise money. So they almost, in some cases, have to go out of business. And so it really leads to the question, why do we even have short selling? Vince, can you sell one of your heads of cattle short?
No. By the way, I found it, class. I just did a search. Cramer admits manipulating stock, YouTube. You'll see it. Cramer admits manipulating stock, YouTube. So you don't have to believe me. You can watch him. He doesn't realize he's on camera. He's talking about how he does it. But no, what I do, if I want to sell a cow, I sell a cow. And I can take it to market. I can sell it to an individual. They pay us for it. They take the cow. It's a done deal. We've done it both ways. We've sold cows right off the farm. We agree on a price. Guy shows up, looks at the cows. We agree on a price. We agree on exactly the cows that he's buying. He brings his trailer. We load him in, pays us, and drives off. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So the analogy would be, is the guy next door to you in the next farm borrows your cow, sells it, but you still think you own it. That would be the analogy to what short selling in the stock market is.
It's an outrage.
Yeah. So really, it shouldn't be allowed. But the beauty of what the Reddit crowd did is they kind of like stuck it to the guys who were sitting back thinking they were going to make all this money short and gave them a scare because, like I explained, the potential loss on a short position is infinite. And indeed, that's exactly what happened with GameStop price when it went to several $100s a share from $5 or $10. And I'm not saying it was worth $200 or $400 a share. Clearly it wasn't. But that's what happens when there's panic and these guys have to cover their position.
Well, there's an old story about what moves the market, and that's greed and fear, right?
Yeah, and the more powerful one is fear.
Yeah. Okay. So would you consider owning paper silver or paper gold?
Well, you're more of a currency and commodity and, precious metal person than I am. But I think it's safer to own, if you're going to invest in gold or silver, and probably there's an argument you should have some percent of your investment in something like that. Obviously you'd want to own the metal, right?
Well, it's kind of like insurance. And I met a guy who said, insurance is better than having the thing. So I'd rather have a bulldozer that could put out a fire around our farm and hoses and water and pumps than have an insurance policy that would allow me to be careless and hopefully repay some of the loss, indemnify me against the loss. I'd rather have the equipment. I'd rather have the tangibles because I can always sell the tangibles. If I decide I don't want that, I bought a bulldozer. I paid very little for it. But if I think there's going to be a fire, I can take that bulldozer out and clean a path around the woods and make a fire break. But if I put that money, the same amount, into farm insurance, at the end of the year, that's gone. I don't have the bulldozer. The money's gone. There's no way of recapturing it. It's like spending money into a black hole. Now, we do have insurance. I don't want you to think we don't. But what I'm saying is I'd rather have the tangibles than the insurance if I had a choice. But we have car insurance and we have farm insurance and all that kind of thing. But what we don't have is some farmers have tractor insurance in case the tractor gets stolen. I mean, to me, that's crazy. I just keep the tractor where I can, within, rifle range. That's what I do.
Yeah. Self-insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something we should, someday we should talk about, lowering insurance costs. By the way, no banker, no insurance agent will, other than, Peggy Gawley, will help us with, insurance questions. They don't want us to know how the system works. A lot of dirty secrets in insurance and banking. And you're learning that. So, we'll be right back with, Bert Bertonis. So we're talking about kind of a minefield, in terms of investing, and it's dangerous. And, the system is really set up so that those who run the system can really profit from it. Bert, is there anything else you want to talk about, or can we just talk about how some of these manipulators have even set up, something in technology, which would be high frequency trading, where they actually set up a microwave tower so they can they can intercept the trades, they can see who's buying, who's selling, and they can place their buy and sell orders, fractions of a second ahead of the generally dumb public. Let's, that might take a little more time to explain, but, a question did come in on who is Robinhood. So I'd like to cover that. Because that's great.
Robinhood is this discount broker that many of these traders were using when they went to the Reddit stock forum and they talked about, let's go after these high shorted stocks. Frequently, they would trade on a company called Robinhood, and they offered free trading. And when something sounds too good to be true, and you really think trading is free, Vince?
I don't think anything's free, even a free lunch. I know that if I got invited to go to lunch with Prince Charles, I'd end up opening my wallet and paying for his. Yeah, so, there's no such thing.
Right. So think about it. This firm Robinhood, which was funded by Wall Street firms, actually literally funded by some of the same hedge funds that these traders are going after, offered free stock trading, and it turns out, of course, it wasn't free. They were getting paid by the exchanges. They were getting kickbacks from the exchanges on the trades. It might just be a few pennies on every trade, but it adds up. But also, they were selling the information on their customers to hedge funds. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They were literally selling your personal financial and trading information to the very hedge funds that we're talking about. And no surprise that they're under attack now, and they had to call off their initial public offering because effectively they weren't working for the customers. They were working for Wall Street.
Yep. Well, it's just like Proud Boys. People went to Washington, D.C., and they thought they were going to do a protest for the president. And Proud Boys were there, and they found out that the leader of Proud Boys was a government informant. And I don't think anybody even thought that was possible. So there's so much confusion, so much misinformation. So I was really frustrated. I wanted to buy something on a little plastic part on gunbroker.com. So I went to Gunbroker. You have to register. And I said, don't send me any of these emails. I don't want them. I said, don't do this. You can check all these options. Well, they have sent me a barrage of emails and I can't get them to stop. And so, finally I sent them an email, and if I can find it, I'll read it. It's kind of interesting. What I said was, hey, listen, you guys, just keep sending me these emails. I'm sick of it. How about you stop sending them to me? Or, hey, why don't you come on the radio with me and tell us about, how we can, here's what I wrote. hello, I have done everything that I can think of to have you stop sending me this barrage of emails, but they keep coming. The only thing I can think of is to discuss this situation on my syndicated radio broadcast. Would you like to come on air with me and explain how to stop getting these unwanted emails? Please advise. Thank you for your help, Vincent Finelli. That's gunbroker.com. So if you're lonely and you want a lot of emails, just go to sign up with gunbroker.com. If you don't, stay away from those guys. That's the kind of stuff that's going on. These hidden businesses, they are selling email addresses. That's what's going on. That's where the business model really is, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, when you respond to junk email to unsubscribe, that usually, more often than not, verifies that you're a live person and you get added to more lists. So it's kind of crazy.
Yes. So the bottom line is, I made a mistake. I mean, I never should have bought this little part. I could have bought it on eBay with, spent more, maybe 50% more. But I thought, I'll just try Gunbroker. What a miserable outfit. And just trying to find out how to unsubscribe with those guys, it's impossible. So I sent them an email and they said, oh, here are the links. Here are all the links that you can use to unsubscribe to all these different promotions that we have. And I went to it and they said, oh, you can't do that because you've closed your account. Yes, out of frustration, I closed my account after a couple days with these guys. They are horrible. So class, when you are asked for your email, maybe you should make one up. Maybe you should make up an email. Oh, pick some name. Oh, maybe Joe. And then pick some common name. What is the most common name you can think of? Joe what? And it might have to be Joe 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 dot or at something.com. That might be a great way to go. And you get blended in with the tens of thousands of Joes. That, I think, is where it's at. Any quick comments, Bert?
No, but I hope we continue to have the Reddit crowd allowed to do what they're doing and not be stopped by any type of further government control.
Yeah. Bert and I are of libertarian leanings. Less government, the way Thomas Jefferson wanted. Bert, thanks so much for being with us.